Like one thing I've always been told is like the 10,000 hour rule. And that's if you like train something for 10,000 hours, then you'll become like mentally, you don't have to think about it all to do it.
Yeah. Do you know where that rule came from?
I used to know that. Now I just know that.
Yeah, it's from violin players. And so they looked at violin players and how many hours
That's right.
the top violin players would practice. And that's where they got that 10,000 hour rule. There's not very good evidence to show that that holds true, especially over
Oh,
all activities.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, especially like think of and there's a book that I was reading. I can't remember the name of the book. They're talking about high jumpers,
Mm-hmm.
and they compared two different types of world champion high jumpers. One of them was, I think, from Sweden, but definitely had the 10,000 hours plus. He just trained his whole life for the high jump, won a world championship. That was kind of the 10,000 hour model. The other model was this guy that was in, I think it was like Northern Iowa or something, University of Northern Iowa. And just for a bet, he like grabbed a dollar bill or something off the top of the backboard or something, jumping. It was something like that. And the track coach saw him do this and said, "Hey, try this high jump thing." And so very first track meet, he went out and jumped like 7.3 and just never did it before. And he went on to like University of Florida or something and actually got coached and went 7.8 or something and then won the world championships that year. Yeah, after doing it just a handful of times because he was a genetic freak, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or something. Um, and so I think there's certain things where it's 10,000 hours. That's probably true, but I think there's also other things where it's you can just be born with it.
Yeah.
And I what I'm currently wondering is, does a 10,000 hour rule just weed people out? Do people get weeded out in those 10,000 hours that would have been really great, but no one takes them seriously because they're a newcomer or they haven't done it, or they don't get their break, their shot. They don't make it to Juilliard to practice the violin for 10,000 hours. Like where do you practice violin for 10,000 hours? Like some of us have to get a job,
Mm-hmm.
and so you kind of end up giving up on stuff. And so I wonder if that 10,000 hour rule discounts a whole lot of really talented people that could be really successful, but they don't get their big shot or they don't get their big break.
Interesting.
There's the bell. I've been very
Um,
big with this year in teaching. I've been very big into for survivorship bias. Like when we look at success in schools, are we really just looking at a survivorship bias? Just for example, students that take three credits of my classes in the health sciences, I just looked, they have an average GPA of 3.5,
Good
which
job.
is, yeah, which is really high. And so and probably the reason why that is because people with worse GPAs than that, or if you fail classes, or let's say you're taking a tutorial class because you're on an IEP or something like that, those students don't have enough elective credit choices left over to take my classes. So the only people that end up showing up to my classes are pretty good students that have plenty of room in their schedule to take goofy elective classes. And so yeah, which is, yeah, I don't know.
So just because we're so as a counterpoint to your theory about the 10,000 hours, you're using as a yardstick of expertise a arbitrary measurement. So if you look at your American high jumper, he jumped as higher than the Swede, but was he as technically proficient? What if he would have gotten the 10,000 hours? How high would he have jumped? We assume that it's an expert, he's reached a level of expertise but that's an arbitrary measurement.
Yeah, but can't you? We can imagine but we can all imagine situations where 10,000 hours goes wrong, right? Within that 10,000 hours, you have 2 knee surgeries on one knee and 3 on the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so if you can survive 10,000 hours, you're probably pretty good. I'm just wondering if that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, that's part of it too. Sure.
Yeah. Well, who was Loudyn? Who's that kid that came out in your? So this is the other cool thing about doing this senior project with Loudyn is some of his other cohort members for his senior project would come out and throw, which was super fun. It was a lot of fun having him out there. But who was that one kid that came out and was pretty good at throwing?
Yeah, he was one of my good buddies. His name's Braden, and we played football together, and we're both Kines majors. And yeah, he didn't play football this year, and so like it frustrated me that like just how first day out he's throwing right up there with me, and I've been doing this for a couple months already.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, he was.
And how many training models out there can exist? I'm thinking just what I'm doing with Loudyn. How many training models can exist where you got football players throwing on Sundays? College football players, they go out and throw on Sunday for football season or whatever. And is that a good enough training model to develop adaptations in some athletes and that they're going to be successful? Maybe not as successful as if they practiced all the time, but I'm wondering, I wonder if we focus a little too much on the 10,000 hours part of things.
Well, you're bumping up against something, in my opinion, that it's 10,000 meaningful hours, right? It's not just rote. It's not just going through the motions. You have to mean it. And so there's certainly, I think, a factor of how hard, how we didn't do nearly as many throws as our contemporaries,
right?
Both at your level at the NC2A and my level at the international. These guys were taking as many throws in one day as I did in a week, but they didn't have a crazy Scotsman making sure that I did every single one as right as I could make it.
Right.
So that's another factor of how long it takes to learn.
Right, and those are organizing principles. And like Stuart, taught me, he taught me about like how many, why did we only take between 20 and 30 throws? And the reason why is it takes 90 seconds to 2 minutes. The downside of doing this at school is we get a bell every now and then. It takes 90 seconds or 2 minutes. Loudyn, you probably know this, for your creatine phosphate to replenish itself. And so, you got to take 2-minute break in between, 1 or 2 throws. And so you're only good for about 90 minutes before you really start tapering off as far as fatigue goes. And so, well, there you go. I mean, so you throw warm up in, and throwing, and you really only got about an hour of throwing. And so you're at 30 throws tops. I mean, that's all you can do. And then after that, once you start just disintegrating a little bit, take a little break.
Is that about what you guys did? Like when you were training for Hammer, would it only be about 30 throws a day?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably more strict.
The most we ever did was 45.
Yeah.
What was that part?
The most we ever did was 45.
Okay.
And I never came early on. That's when we were all pretty young and pretty new throwers. So the more mature, the less you can do, the less you have to do, and the less you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I never got close to 45. Like it was a pretty, 30 was about the limit. But he was right there the whole time coaching us. Like this idea that we would just go take, 20 throws by ourselves or something like that, and they might wander over and see a couple of them. That was going to happen. It was, the whole idea is that we only had 90 minutes, so we were going to make it the best 90 minutes possible.
Somebody needs to do the math on how many hours, Adam, you and I actually did take. before we reached our maximum. Take a stab at it. If you're right, and you are, back in the day, early on in the 80s, we were taking 45, but we didn't do that forever.
Right.
So, 2-hour practice, maybe, but yeah, the 1.5-hour thing seems really right. And
I think throwing, it was, I think, under 90 minutes if you went with a warm up and just throwing.
Yeah.
And
most days, that was only 2 days a week. And then there were 3 others where we did 30 and 20. So yeah, I mean, Sundays we did 45 minutes of throwing.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, and we'd only throw 4 or 5 days a week. With, Wednesdays was active rest.
yeah.
So we'd play soccer and do some stairs and that sort of stuff. So I think I'm one of the more privileged people ever to walk the planet. Wonderful family, great middle-class lifestyle. Nothing bad has ever happened to me ever once. I've had every opportunity. So yeah, of course I'm going to put in 10,000 hours, because what else am I going to do? I got 10,000 hours to give. It's no big deal. I wonder if there's training models that can work for people that don't have 10,000 hours. Like is there, how much adaptation can we get with Loudyn with 1 day a week?
Oh, you're breaking.
Do you guys hear that little echo?
Yeah, you kind of wiggled out, you wobbled out there a minute.
Because it was brilliant, darn it.
So you're posing the question of how long it would take, what's a model that wouldn't take 10,000 hours? I just did a quick thing. I did 1.5 hours per training session, 5 days a week, which is how often we threw. I forgot to put one factor in there. Yeah, never mind.
Okay. I mean, but I think you still have to count the, you guys count the weight training, like that's important. I think that goes into the 10,000 hours. You might even have to count in the meets and the competitions and traveling. Those are all skills that are involved in performing well. I don't know how you count the 10,000 hours, but I do think I would be interested to explore some models that would maximize adaptation with less hours of work. I think what Loudyn's doing here is what we're kind of playing around with is kind of cool. I think it's a kind of a cool thing. What do you do with someone that's already got a stressed physiological system by playing football and wrestling? How much adaptation can they get in the hammer? I think it's a fun question to ask, and we can just substitute football for poverty, or wrestling for, being an English language learner. I think you can kind of start playing around with that idea.
Yeah. And I did it again. If you just took our throwing.
Yeah.
In my 18 years of throwing, which presumably I hit my expertise in 96 when I threw my last PR, and did 3 more years after that. I did 6,000 hours of throwing training.
Wow.
So, and the weightlifting, I don't know if you're just talking about technical expertise, I don't think you can put in weight training.
Well, I mean,
about success in the hammer and using distance as the mark of success. Yeah. But warm-ups maybe, but not bounding and lifting in my way of feeling about the technique.
Yeah, I think the strength training, getting strong enough, definitely opens up different aspects of the technique that wouldn't necessarily be.
And back to a point way back, I was as strong coming in that I ever was. I didn't get stronger in it.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't. But I keep saying that, but I was at my parents' house. We were going through old pictures when my sister was up here, and I saw old pictures of me throwing in high school. I don't look like a bad athlete. You know, like with the high school athletes I coach now don't necessarily look like I did back in high school. You know, I think I need to give myself a little bit more credit than I do in my head. I just, you know, spent a good 9 years comparing myself to like you and the rest of the Olympians that would roll through town. And, but anyway,